Honourable Senators, thank you, merci, for inviting me to testify before your committee today concerning Bill C-18, the Online News Act. I come before you today representing Western Standard New Media Corporation, which includes a growing body of regional publications, including the revived Alberta Report. We are a publication highly unlike the large corporate media that have lobbied for this bill. As a so-called qualified Canadian journalism organization, we are eligible to receive the full suite of taxpayer subsidies that media are now entitled to in Canada, but we refuse to accept them. We believe that for media to be independent, we must be independent of the state. While the legacy media in Canada cry poor and claim that they're unable to make ends meet in the challenging environment of our industry, we have thrived. We have gone from a small group around my dining room table in 2019 to the most read online publication in Alberta. We have a large newsroom in our Calgary headquarters, bustling with activity and breaking original stories every day. We have bureaus in Vancouver, Edmonton, Regina, and Ottawa. And we did it all without the help of the government. I'm here today to plead with you to help stop the government from forcing its help on us through C-18. One of the most critical ways in which we were able to grow so quickly was the availability of platforms like Facebook to deliver our content to potential readers at no cost. Facebook made it possible for startups like ours to get our products in front of potential customers without the need for large, costly delivery operations. My first job was as a small town paperboy. In the winter, I even delivered papers to a makeshift dog sled with my husky. The local paper paid me to deliver their product to their customers. In 2023, Facebook is the new paperboy, albeit a very rich one. They deliver our products to our customers, but they do it for free. But greedy newspaper executives, not content with the existing massive bailout of their failing businesses, have come cap in hand to the government for even more. What they got was Bill C-18, which would force Facebook and Google to pay them for their content, for delivering their content to their customers. If the government had passed a law in 1995 requiring paperboys to pay the local paper for the privilege of delivering their products, I obviously would have quit. It should come as no surprise then that that is what today's paperboys, Facebook and Google, have promised to do. Of course, they will not pay the legacy media for helping the legacy media. It's asinine. There will be no free money from these tech giants. They'll simply turn off the news in Canada. And independent media in Canada will be collateral damage for their greed. We never asked for this bill, and we were never consulted in it. But we will have a massive source of our traffic turned off as Facebook and Google retaliate for this naked rent-seeking operation. Bill C-18 should be killed, but I understand that the Senate generally prefers to amend legislation rather than defeat it. So here's my ask. Please amend the bill to ensure that those of us not trying to grift our way to profitability are not collateral damage. Please amend the bill to make it explicitly opt-in so that only media that want to partake in this shakedown are included. Importantly, this includes removing or amending Section 51, which prohibits Facebook or Google from treating news media outlets differently. This is important because these platforms should not be required to shut down content from media outlets like the Western Standard that are not trying to fleece them. Let Goliath fight with Goliath, but do not require that the Davids here get caught in the crossfire of their squabble. One of the most important principles of our common law is that the government cannot force two unwilling parties to enter into contract with one another against their will. But that is precisely what Bill C-18 attempts to do. A free press must be free to enter into its own contracts of its own free will. And government's only role whatsoever must be in upholding those contracts in court. More subsidies, direct and indirect, from taxpayers or other industries will not save the legacy media. Competition, adaptability, and innovation will, if anything can. All these lifelines thrown to big media do is to stifle the ability of startup new media to compete. Parliament has no place in regulating the media. The state has no place in the newsrooms of the nation. I thank you for taking the time to hear me out, and I beg of you, let the remaining free press remain free. And please, for the love of God, stop trying to help us.
A first question, it's a short question for you, Mr. Derek Hildebrandt. You said you wanted an opt-in clause. How about, other media have talked to me about this. How about an opt-out clause in Section 27? Because I understand that the CRTC can decide at any point who's in. So would you be satisfied with an opt-out clause for a media like yours, and we've talked before, so I understand your quest here.
Thank you for the question, Senator. It would be an improvement over the current bill, but my concern is, in my discussions with Meta and Google, that their retaliation is. I really hate that I have to sit here and defend two companies I really don't like, but I'm not here to defend them. They're just the least bad guy in this. But they're going to retaliate for this, as they have a right to do and as I would expect them to do. And they're probably not going to go through a list of the thousands of Alberta publications. I know some of the senators here have Substack pages. Those could very plausibly be considered news to some extent, or at least opinion on news and caught within media, and then blocked on these platforms. And in my discussions with Meta and Google, they're not going to hire a whole team of people to crawl through every little page and say, okay, well, these guys have opted out, these guys are in. They're just going to blanket ban it, which is why if we make the bill opt in, it makes it possible for us to contain this fight between the Goliaths to those who want to have the fight. I don't want to have the fight, and I shouldn't have to enter the ring and say I shouldn't be by default in the ring. I should not have to walk into it if I don't want to walk into it. I suppose another interesting alternative would be to take the advice of one of the previous witnesses, and I will voluntarily have us labeled as a hate group if that will get us out of this bill.
Okay, thank you for this short answer.
Mr. Hildebrandt, you were in the room when we heard the last witnesses talking about what they felt to be a need for a code of ethics. As you well know, because back when I was a journalist and you were a politician, we've changed roles here. It's really important that the press be free to report without fear or favor. And I realize I'm putting you in an awkward position since you have stated very plainly here that you do not wish the help of C18. But what challenges do you perceive in your new role as journalist with the idea of the CRTC deciding who's legitimate and who is not?
Thank you, Senator. We already have so-called Canadian Qualified Journalism Organization status. I applied for it as a joke, just to see what would happen. I had no intention of accepting the subsidies, but we did get it. And the kind lady from CRTC asked me if I would like any help in now filling out the forms for the different subsidies. And I just said, no, it was all a gag. And I thank the CRTC for it. But there are challenges.
It's the CRA, right?
Sorry, I meant CRA,
CRA,
not
yeah.
CRTC. Yeah, forgive me. There are challenges. Advertising
I
is
hate
tough.
to cut you off, Mr. Hildebrandt, but I have the unenviable task of being the gatekeeper today.
Cut off press and former politicians.
So freedom has its limits in the Senate.
I have a question for Mr. Hildebrandt. You explained your funding model, as I have just said, how do you assess that? How do you assess the revenues that you get in terms of advertisement, and how much do you get from subscriptions?
I want to know exactly how do you evaluate the amount of money you get from publicities, from and how from the les abonnements, how do you say abonnements? Subscriptions.
We receive, our revenue is split. It varies month to month, but on average, we're roughly 50% subscriptions, 50% advertising. It's fluctuated over time. It's taken us a long time to build up our capacity to sell advertising. I mean, I'm not entirely without sympathy for media that have talked about the collapse of the advertising model. Google has come in, like when we first started the Western Standard, we tried building Google ads, that auto-populate from Google in, and they just paid pennies on the dollar. It wasn't worth it, just made the website look ugly and gave virtually no money. So we took them out. But we had to painstakingly over a few years build our ability to directly sell ads to customers. And that's very difficult work. I hate it. It's really hard to find people who are good at that. But it is necessary to do for the media if they want to have any advertising side of it. But conversely, we absolutely need subscriptions. That's roughly 50% of our revenue. We refer to as memberships, but it's same thing, subscriptions. And it's like not to make this a commercial, but it's $10 a month, and we have a limited paywall mechanism in place, so that we're able to, between those two sources, fund our operations.
Donc, selon ce que je vois là sur les publicités,
Okay, so what I see from the advertising income that you get, you have reached independence, even if United Conservatives take out ads. You are nonetheless journalistically independent. You're not affected by that ad that is on your site.
If they're willing to pay our posted rate, we've offered to sell ads to the Alberta New Democratic Party, other smaller political parties. We have private businesses that advertise, not-for-profit organizations. Now, the independents, Senator Simons, others here who have been around the business know that you have to do your very best to try and have a firewall in place between your advertisers and your newsrooms. And most journalists will also know, particularly in smaller publications where it's not hundreds of people in a building where you can physically separate each other. Back in the 90s, maybe the advertising department would never meet the news department. But you have to try your very best to have a firewall in place. But it is impossible to 100% separate it. Any publisher who tells you otherwise is probably lying, which is one reason that direct government funding of the media is so dangerous. And now the proposal in C-18 to bring in tech giants funding the media is dangerous, because then we'll have these, no one advertiser for us makes up a critical portion of our revenue, but the government is making up 33% now.
I don't want you to be cut by the chair, so
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your answer.
Merci pour ton.
I guess the question I have with the couple of minutes that are left has to do with CBC, which of course gets over $1 billion a year in government funding, and simultaneously they compete in the same marketplace that your magazines and your local newspapers are competing for advertising dollar. And now we have a bill which we are going to be giving them additional funding from digital giants in order to continue to compete. And of course, I'd like to know what your views are on that. Go ahead.
This is sort of a follow-up to the question I didn't get to complete from Senator Simons about what are the challenges we're facing. The biggest challenge by far we face at the Western Standard, at least, is that our competitors are subsidized with our own tax dollars. We are a relatively small company paying taxes to Ottawa that are then redistributed to our competitors. So, for instance, CBC, I'm not going to get into whatever anyone thinks about them, but they're clearly a competitor. And while they're technically a broadcaster, the distinctions between what is a broadcaster, a magazine, a newspaper, they're irrelevant today. I fought with the Workers' Compensation Board about if the Western Standard was a magazine or a newspaper. Well, we're kind of neither. We used to be a magazine at one point, but we had to fight over it because that determined what our premiums were. They're all the same thing. We're all online. Some have a physical manifestation with a CRTC license. Some might have a physical print product, but you can't tell the difference with them anymore. So the CBC is not just competing with CTV and Global. They're competing with the Edmonton Journal, the Western Standard, the Toronto Star. But then Post Media, the Heralds, the Journals, the Suns, they're competing with us as well. And they're doing so with our tax dollars against us. C-18 wouldn't necessarily be our tax dollars against us, but still giving a leg up to our competitors over us. Theoretically, if the money is actually there. I'm very skeptical that the money will actually be there, and just that we're going to be collateral damage in their fight between them. But if there really is anything that Ottawa can do to help independent publishers, the innovative ones, the guys who are selling light bulbs, not candles, is to stop funding the candle industry. Stop trying to advantage our competitors over us with our own tax dollars, and let nature, let the market sort it out. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access.